You've been gone, it's an empty home. Come on back where you really belong. You are always welcome home, welcome
Over 200 years ago, when the Negro slave trade was flourishing between West Africa and the New World, a number of the more rebellious slaves escaped from their white masters into the dense jungles of Dutch Guiana. There they lived in comparative safety and followed a code of living that is still practiced by their descendants, who are known today as jukas, the bush Negroes of Dutch Guiana. The approach to this unique land of the jukas is by way of a treacherous river which rises and falls in accordance with the whimsical rainfall of the tropics and penetrates the darkest recesses of the jungle.
Thank you.
Because when I was in the 80s, I believe, 1984,
Yes.
that a newsreel came that Howard University had information on a runaway slave group that when they were landed 500 years earlier, they broke away from the Dutch or the Danes and joined the Indians in the interior in South America.
Yes.
And they sent a delegation up country and found that the people were speaking the Akan language as we have in Ghana here.
Yes.
And their customs were like time has stood still.
Yes.
So they were Ghanaians. Yes. And I saw it where they said that the white man was afraid because they were warriors, these breakaway ones. And when they joined the Indians called them the black ants, and they called the Indians the red ants. The black and the red ants joined together because the Indians were having a problem with whites as well.
Yes.
And I said, this is a story that is yet to be told. I mean, do you know the glory and the depth of something like that? It's not written in the book. It's a living, live legacy, and you are one of them.
Yes, we still live it because when I came to Ghana, I came here. I look young, but I'm an old lady, I'm telling everybody. I came here 25 years ago as a social scientist at a Panafest of 1997.
Yes, it was in Cape Coast.
In Cape Coast. And there were 3 paramount chiefs and representative of my paramount chief, because he was growing older, but he died, I believe, 30 years later, but he was not traveling. He was a very wise man. Mm-hmm. And when we came to Ghana, I was so happy that I came, because then I was working as so-called poverty alleviation expert with the Dutch Treaty Fund. Mm-hmm. So I was for gender, I was for poverty programs, but I was the liaison officer for the European Union program for Caribbean. So we came, the 3 of us. So when we came here 25 years ago, I was like, okay, I never wanted to live in America, never wanted to live in Holland, but I want to live in Ghana. Because I saw myself, we saw the food, we saw the culture. It was the same way, the language, the same way when we speak. But I need to stop there. That is Mr. Virgil Pinas, our 3rd secretary and the heart of the embassy. Because he has the heart of the embassy unbeat, because he's our financial attaché and 3rd secretary. So he's so I rely, and he's the one that opened this embassy, started and set up the embassy for the government in 2019.
Well, my respect to you, my brother. Wait a minute.
Thank you, Doctor.
My respect to you. You know, I don't know Your Excellency. We've been able to do it, but the biggest hurdle was that there are 3 different categories of diasporans in the world. First, you have the indigenous diaspora to the African continent. That is the diaspora that's been here for thousands, if not a million years, that they cross borders with cattle. They're nomads, migrants. Nobody ever questioned that. It's even happening today. Then you have the second tier of a diaspora, and that is the one that was subject under coup d'etats and the poverty factor which you see today, our brethren and sisters running to Europe. And that one, because of coup d'etats, that is the second tier diaspora. Now that third tier is really, in my opinion, the real diaspora. That is the one that did not volunteer to leave. Yes. That is the one that was kidnapped.
Exactly.
So the reason I'm bringing this up, by coming up with the Ghana Homeland Return Act. Have you heard of this one?
No.
Yeah, you need to get. I'll send you a copy of it. Yeah, this is very important.
It's important.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the Ghana Homeland Return Act. You see, let me just dilate on that a moment. Before, when we were getting our citizenship, no African government had ever stepped out and recognized us.
Yes.
And said, I want my children to come home.
To come home.
I mean, there could have been some governments that were sensitized to it, but there's no officialdom. No government ever reached out. And it was here in Ghana where we had to cultivate over 35 years, I started in 1989. And then throughout 1990s, we got intensified this advocacy and outreach to the government. But we didn't get what we wanted, because when by 2000, the Jerry John Rawlings government had been ousted from power, and they had the NPP under President Kufuor, Ajikun Kufuor, and the best that they could do was to give us the right of abode, and the right of abode virtually did not recognize us. And so we kept the fire burning, and we continued. And I'm saying that and the rallying cry was the right to return. Now, let me just, Frederick and Your Excellency, you need to know this, what I'm about to say. I've seen Munso. You may not have heard of this place, but let me just give you just a brief. When the peak of the slavery was going on, there were 66 slave ports between Senegal down to Angola. The Gold Coast, which is Ghana today,
yes,
had 46. 46 of the 66. So you can imagine. And 26 of them are still standing today, including right here in Accra, Christiansburg, Cape Coast, Elmina, Santiago, all the way down. They're here today. But something happened. And this is why I say Suriname is extremely important. It is that Jerry John Rawlings traveled to Jamaica in 1997 on a state visit. And he happened to be traveling at the time that the Caribbean was celebrating emancipation. And he had never seen...
August, the first
the 1st of August. And he had never seen the pomp and pageantry. And his wife, Nana Ajiman Rawlings, she was with him. And they were mystified over the fact of what they saw. And they went to Trinidad and Tobago, that's where it was. Yes. And they saw this, and J.J. Rawlings said, we have to bring this to Ghana. Now, the reason I'm giving you this narrative is that some spiritual things were happening during that time. And during that particular period, 1997, there was a lady in Kingston, Jamaica. She's passed away now, named Mignon Phillips. She used to be the cook for Bob Marley. And she fell in love with the slave cemetery outside of Kingston. And they had dug up the cadavers of several. And it was a little girl and it went back almost about 300 years. That she saw the remains of, and she decided that she was going to get close and adopt spiritually this remains, and it was a crystal. She took a crystal and put it around the remains, and so this particular cadaver came to be named Crystal. And at the same time in New York City, in the 1992-93 downtown Manhattan, a construction company was getting ready to put up another high-rise, and they had the bulldozers digging deep, for the foundation,
Yes.
and they hit a graveyard. It was a slave graveyard. And the Dutch were the ones that had New York.
New York.
And they had
New Amsterdam.
It was called Yorktown, wasn't it? Yeah, but they had to get the old blueprints, and they come to find out that this was a African slave cemetery. So all of these remains are coming up, and then the NGOs got involved. So let me fast track. The long and the short of all that, it led to moving into 1998, because JJ had said in 1997 when he was there that the next year they're going to have emancipation in Ghana.
Yes.
So to fast track it, the Jamaican side came in, joined hands with Ghana. Can they bring this little girl, Crystal, and have her reinterred in Ghana? And then in New York, it came to be known that one of the cadavers came to be known as Samuel Carson, Carson. He was about 175 years old. And so the government of Ghana sponsored a state funeral to bring them back to Ghana and to have them reinterred here. And it was a big fight here amongst the indigenous chiefs. Who is going to get it? Because they know this is going to be a big thing, whoever gets it. And they won out at Asin Manso. And at Asin Manso, why it is important, when our people were captured during the peak of the slave trade, many were taken from the north, and they were marched months along the way. And many died, of course, along the way. And by the time that they got down to Cape Coast, they were so emaciated, and they had to, because they had at the castle, you had a palava hall for the buying and the examination of them. So they had to get them cleaned up. And Et Asin Manso is about 25 miles west in the interior from the coast of Cape Coast. And so there's a river, and the river they call it Nsuo Donko, meaning slave river. And so that river there is where it was a station place for all of the captives coming down would take their last bath. And it became known as the last bath before they would take them on over. Now, the moral of this whole story is this. We have been asking for the right to return, which eventually now has led to the year of return. But what is our right to return? Nobody recognized us. No government was reaching out telling us to come home. But JJ made the point. And so we picked up on it. And so the bottom line of that was simply this. If you can give citizenship to the dead, why can't you give it to the living? And so this is why I come back to Surinam. Surinam is not a novel of somebody writing about what happened. Surinam is a living legacy. So if they ask me, as a Surinamese, a person, that I want citizenship, hey, you're looking at a heritage that my bloodline is descended, and they are still, my folks are still there. African Americans don't have that. Jamaicans, to a degree, they claim that the government never accepted it from them. The other Caribbeans don't have it. But you have it. But nobody knows.
Thank you. I thank you, Professor, because I've been telling them.
Yes.